All right, thanks for joining us. This is Standpoint. I am Precious Amayu. Now, former military leader Ibrahim Babangida has openly expressed remorse for annulling the June 12, 1993 presidential election after 32 years. Now, the idea that the truth was always surfaces no matter how long it takes resonates in this development, as former military head of state General Ibrahim Babangida admits the late MKO Abiola won the June 12, 1993 presidential election. The June 12 election is widely regarded as one of the freest and fairest in Nigeria's history, but it was annulled by Babangida's regime, leading to widespread protest and unrest. Abiola, who was presumed to have won the election, was later imprisoned, and he died in custody in 1998. Now, IBB's acknowledgement is seen as a significant milestone in Nigeria's democratic journey. Joining me via Zoom for this conversation is the convener of the June the 12th Movement of Nigeria, Olawale Okuni. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you. Good afternoon, Nigerians.
As expected, reactions, we're seeing mixed reactions trailing this particular statement coming from the former head of state. Some have said, well, it's remorse. Others have said it's maybe just a bit too late, 32 years after. But what do you make of it?
Well, for me, it may be late. It's a welcome development. It's welcome. It's better late than never. It is a validation of the struggles for the annulment of June 12. It is a welcome development. It's a confession. It's a confessional statement. It pricked the conscience of Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida to come out at his old age to make this revelation. So we really are jubilating and rejoicing that this has come from the horse's mouth. It is for us better late than never, and it has come to further consolidate the truth which we have always been speaking about the June 12 presidential elections of 1993, that MKO won it and that this is a victory for the Nigerian people. This is a victory for democracy. However, government should do more. Rather than just listen to that confession, I think that government will have to take a step forward.
When you say, okay, we'll come to the idea of taking a step forward. But for some people, this is not, it's 32 years after, it's water under the bridge. It doesn't really have any impact beyond just, acknowledging that he won that election. His daughter actually also said, after Abiola said, look, it's been validated that her father's victory has already been validated, and this really means nothing. But what impact do you think that statement will have?
It will have impact if government can then do the needful. Apart from the honor given to MKO Abiola, GCFR, I think that for those who make sacrifices in supporting MKO Abiola and the restoration of his mandate, and who made sacrifices like members of his family, government should really look at them and do something to compensate them. That look, your father won this, he struggled for it, and the military killed him. We can do something. Because whatever you do for any of MKO Abiola child or wife is done to him. In any case, his will, if he has one, given what we have seen of his will, was for his family. So we can do all of that. And for those who also died, struggling for the validation of that mandate, I think this is the time for government to do a list of those who really made sacrifices, who paid supreme prices, who were affected one way or the other. This is the time of the government of Nigeria under President Bola Ahmed, who was even one of us at that time, who was one of us fighting for it. But as a matter of fact, he had to escape to exile. Current President Bola Ahmed Tinubu had to escape to exile. We were here, we were left here fighting on the field, engaging the military on the field of the struggle, just like Chifa Adebanjo, who recently passed on, to ensure the rehabilitation of that. So all of those, and he would have more memory or better memory than anybody of those who were involved and those who paid sacrifices. So the oaths is government to begin to look at how we can compensate those who paid sacrifice or made sacrifice for the struggle. This is the time for them to benefit from that struggle.
But does this really carry along with it?
That is the kind of impact that this statement can make.
I was going to ask you if you think that this carries along with it, that statement, a healing effect, considering that the man in question, that's MKO, has died. His wife also died in that struggle. A lot of people died in that struggle. Some were arrested. Their lives never remained the same. So does this, how weighty is that statement coming from IBB, and does it carry along with it any healing effect?
Well, it should, like I've said, it should really have some healing effect in that if you compensate or reward those who made losses. The children of Kudirat Abiola were those Afsat Abiola, etc. All of them made sacrifices and they can be compensated. And again, some of the effect that it will have is that those who are running our democracy today should aspire to do well, because history will unveil again the wrongs that they have done. So therefore, I am saying that the effect will be that government at this point would strive to do better than what they are doing at the moment, knowing fully well that the truth will be unveiled at some point.
In one breath, he does IBB. He said he takes responsibility for the annulment, but in another breath, he also talked about how he wasn't really the one who called the shot. As it were, he blamed Abacha for what happened, and many people have said, look, whilst Abacha was a high-ranking officer, but in terms of ranks at that time, compared to the man who was the head of state, he wasn't at the same rank. So perhaps that blame wasn't necessary. I also wanted to get your thought on that. Where in one breath he said, "I take responsibility, but this is the person to blame."
I think that is not acceptable. That is a bit irresponsible. It's a bit irresponsible for the leader of government to say that he was not in charge. He was actually in charge. He allowed it. If he hadn't allowed it, it wouldn't have been. And that is, for me, our take in the June 12th movement, that he was just trying to find the excuse. He was in charge. Yes, he allowed his men or his boys to gang up. He would have put down his foot to say no. So I don't accept that. And I think we don't really accept that. He should have done better that. Abacha. No, we don't. And Abacha is not even there now to speak for himself. So that he shouldn't go there. He should just have left that out. What he should have taken is to take, just like he have said, take full responsibility. The box ends on his table as the president, commander-in-chief of the armed forces. So the whole question of stepping aside does not arise. Babangida is too brilliant and too clever to say Abacha. No, he should take full responsibility, as he have said is done. Thank you.
Now, we understand that the results of that election, were also published in that book. I'm wondering, I know that I think it's the one who, as the man who was in charge of NEC at the time, had also published a book and talked about those results as well. The idea of publishing it, I'm not sure if those were the results directly from NEC, but do you think that that removes all doubt and squash every argument?
Sure. I mean, Babangida was at the head of the government, and then he should have access to whatever information. I mean, those things would have been submitted to him by security agents and agencies, and then the NEC at that time must have confided in him. What he did, the publication of the result it's a validation of the fact that MKO Abiola won that, and there is no doubt. It takes every doubt away. Every doubt, every iota of that is taken away that MKO Abiola won that, and that election should not have been annulled in the first place. So this is quite legitimate as far as I'm concerned. The result is good enough to take all doubt away.
I want to digress a bit and then come back to this issue, but staying within the confines of that gathering. I mean, for someone who has been demonized and badly spoken about by some people, you find that at that gathering you had almost every head of state anyone who had ever governed this country, those who are alive, and then you also had leaders from other African countries. And what I was wondering, I mean, people have said this man was a dictator, he annulled the election, and yet, for the first time, everyone gathered for a man like that. I'm wondering what does that tell you?
Well, Babangida is a man of influence, considering the fact that he's run the country for 9 years, and he ran it in such a way that he consulted with every nooks and crannies of this country, everyone that matters. Babangida is very skillful, dangerously in the negative, very skillful, and he has influence on even the ongoing democracy. He also participated. So, well, for those in the ruling class, you will not find anybody that would not want to be part of that. So he's influential. You see how people go to him when they want to vie for presidency or vie for political offices. It shows that he's still relevant among the ruling elite. Therefore, it's not out of place to find everybody gathered together at that level. You won't find those in the left or those who are the voices of the people in that gathering, or you find the ruling class. So it's not out of place. It is something to be expected. Not for me, it's not something surprising.
You also find that these are people who on a normal day would not see eye to eye, some of them, because of the history, of our nation. Do you think that there was a missed opportunity there to have everyone in the room, and then it wasn't really a time, apart from claiming responsibility for the annulment, but that it wasn't really a time to talk about the history of our nation and how to move forward, especially because these are leaders that everyone sort of look up to from different regions of the country, and perhaps that could have been a time to set the tone for healing for the country. Was there a missed opportunity there?
Yeah, sure. I expected that for them to also X-ray, review, and reevaluate the way forward, coming from that historical perspective of June 12, and then say, look, we must, having done this, what did MKO Abiola stand for? Abiola stood for what you call restructuring and democratic federalism. And it's at that point that they should have, review, the state of the nation to see how they can all agree to move the nation towards constitutional restructuring through federalism. I think that was missed at that point. They should have done that in consolidating the acknowledgement, the confession, which may not really matter, but because the whole honor they could have done to that confession and to the memory of MKO is to look at the state of the nation and say what actually was the policy thrust of campaign for MKO Abiola at that time, and can we do something about it? How popular is that? And today that is still popular. That is where we all stand. You know, as a matter of fact, after his demise, the demise of MKO Abiola, the G54 at that time that came together, talked about government of national unity and sovereign national conference. At that time, the sovereign national conference would have given you a new people's constitution, an agreed constitution by the Nigerian peoples or the Nigerian constituents, would have given you a constitution that can be agreed and democratically so. And that is what the nation still crave, to have a constitution that can create a balance and equilibrium politically, and that can create unity and stability, and then we can build on a prosperous Nigeria. That is what MKO Abiola's, and I think that gathering should have, ignited, that process at that level. But it's missed. It's never late. Some of us will continue the conversation. As a matter of fact, the June 12 movement will be issuing a major statement on that confession today. So in that statement, you'll find the way forward.
And I was going to ask you about because you mentioned the Sovereign National Conference, and that statement made by the head of state is still very fresh. People are still reacting to it. Perhaps it's not too late. Is it time again, beyond the Sovereign National Conference? I'm also thinking, because that particular statement was addressing, or that gathering also addressed one of what people call historical injustice in the history of our nation, that perhaps, do you think that it's also time to address other historical injustices, for example, assassinations that were never resolved, coups that people felt like set the trajectory of our country way backward, wars that we've had within the country? Is it time to start addressing? Does that statement give us a springboard to start addressing historical injustices?
For sure, it gives us more than a springboard to have a conference of Nigerians or different diverse peoples of Nigeria, ethnic nationality, etc., and citizens, to work at national reconciliation and national healing. If you have that conference, that sovereign national conference, it will lead to national reconciliation. At that conference, we can discuss our past, and then at that point, then begin to say, okay, can we correct this wrong, which brings about national healing. So we need urgent conference in Nigeria that can bring about national reconciliation and national healing, so that we will stop having the turbulence and the incohesion and the instability in Nigeria that is really affecting our economy. When you have an unstable polity, you cannot do any business. No investment can survive. And that is what we are witnessing. There is mistrust and distrust. And so the Nigerian people have to come together to discuss. And I think the government of Bola Tinubu should really facilitate that urgently. Latching on the confession of MKO Abiola. It's a good time to say, hey, can we have national reconciliation and national healing? Can we have a conference of Nigerian citizens, Nigerian leaders, Nigerian stakeholders, Let us sit down so that we can have a template, a good template, a stable template for a prosperous economy. Until we do that, there can never be any economic reform that will help Nigeria. It's not going to be possible. Every economic reform that will be productive will spring up from national unity, national cohesion, national harmony. There is no, that is missing. That has been elusive for a long time. So we are saying that this government should latch on the convention of IBB to begin to deal with how we can create unity, stability, political stability for economic prosperity. And that can only come when we have a conference, the people of Nigeria, the gathering, where the people will come together to identify the various nationalities in Nigeria, the various constituencies, and even other blocks, private sector, etc., professional bodies can sit together and work out a united front through a new imposed constitution that can be owned by everybody. What we have now was also imposed by the military, that was heralded by the IBB regime. The Absalami Abubakar regime foisted a decree on the country and christened it a constitution of 1999 under Decree 24, 1999. You cannot operate a decree as a constitution of the people. It's an aberration. A decree is a mere law. It is not the ground norm and totality of the agreement of the Nigerian people. It is just a law. Any constitution made by an arm of government or a government, even democratic government or military government, it's reduced to a law, because a government cannot give a country a constitution. It is the people in their diversity that can give that can agree on a constitution, and then it will agree on the kind of government that they want to run or manage their affairs. So what we got in 1999 was an aberration imposed by the military, and that has not helped us even up to now. So the government of Bola Ahmed Tinubu should quickly revisit that foundation. For if the foundation of any country is faulty, what can the righteous do? There is no righteousness. You will just be one groping in darkness because you haven't got the map. And that's why people are talking about re-engineering of the political architecture of Nigeria. So it is incumbent and very imperative for the present government, if it must succeed, if it must succeed and do not just look for its own personal gain. I build a personal dynasty, what I can gain for myself, rapacious aggrandizement, etc. He must immediately look at the foundation of Nigeria and see where it's failing. There can never
Mr.
be any
Okuni, allow me put you on hold. Just allow me to put you on hold.
Except something fundamental is done. It is only in Nigeria that you have a degree as a constitution.
Mr. Okuni, just a minute. I want to bring in our guest who just joined us in the studio here in Lagos. He's a rights activist, GT Ogunye. Good to have you join us.
Yes, my pleasure. Thanks. Good afternoon.
So I know that you have followed, of course, you had followed the conversation arising from that book launch by the former military head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, up until now, where it is still, we're having mixed reactions trailing it. But I wanted to, get your thought. When that news broke, that he had made that statement about taking responsibility for the annulment and declaring that the MKO actually won that election. How did it come to you?
Too little, too late. There are people, of course, that will salute retired General President Babangida for putting pen to paper in his memoir and making a public confession that that election was not only free and fair, but was one of the best organized elections in this country, and that Chief M.K. Abiola actually won the election. Why is it too little, too late? He's making the confession when it no longer matters. Before him, his associates, political associates, and his appointees while he was military president made such confession, even more poignantly and categorically. I reference Professor Omomorui, now late, who was the Director General of his Center for Democratic Studies, and who, as it were, shepherded the transition to civil rule program organized by President Babangida. Professor Humphrey Nwosu had also written a book, and he made that confession, and many, many others. So President Babangida is not telling us what we didn't know. What is refused to say, however, he claimed that yes, as the head of that government, he accepted responsibility. It's beyond that.
You think there are still questions that have not been answered?
For example, he parried certain responsibilities. One, he said he took responsibility, but that he was not the one who annulled the election. That's not true. That cannot be true because there are precedents. You know, June 12th election annulment was not an isolated event. And you need to live in that time to know. Here was a military president that unfolded a very long transition program, unbanned politics and politicians from 1986 onward. Before that time, there was a political debate, there was a cookie report. It was very elaborate. And so there was even a 1989 constitution. People have forgotten, meaning that he ought to have left power in 1989. He kept tinkering. He kept banning and unbanning. He kept shifting the goalpost. It was a transition of no end. It was a transition to nowhere. He knew what he was doing. So the culmination was the annulment. That was not the only incident. And so he kept shifting. If you look at the precedent, therefore, and the circumstances, that annulment was what he desired. It was not an accident. It was not something that was done by forces outside his control. The impression is created in his book and before now was that he was a victim of his lieutenants who became too powerful and that therefore he was held hostage. So he therefore didn't know what he was doing. So it was not. With profound respect, that's not true. Meaning that even at this old age, he's still not coming clean and true. He's still not stating, he is still manipulating history. History cannot be that manipulated. Look.
Mr. Jute, I'll let you hold your thought. We'll take a break, and then when we return, you'll continue with that. But we're speaking on the statement made by the former military head of state, Ibrahim Babangida, taking responsibility for the annulment of June 12. We've been speaking with rights activist Jute Ogunye, as well, who is joining us in the studio, as well as Mr. Kuni, who is also joining us via Zoom. We'll take a break now, and when we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us.
Bag of rice no get the new Big Bull holographic seal.
Not true.
Introducing the Big Bull holographic seal tape, your favorite authentic Big Bull rice, 50 kg and 25 kg. Now with holographic seal tape. This is to ensure you get the premium product from Big Bull rice. Do not buy if the holographic seal tape is not on the bag or is broken. Big Bull rice, tasty rice, nourished you.
Thanks for staying with us. This is Standpoint. We're talking about the implication of the statement made by the former military head of state, Ibrahim Babangida. Like I said earlier, you already know he took responsibility for the annulment of the June 12 election. We've been speaking with the rights activist, Titi Oguye, who is joining us in the studio. We're also joined by the convener, June 12 Movement of Nigeria, and is General Secretary, the Patriots. He is Mr. Olawale Okuniyi, who joins us via Zoom. Good to have you join us.
Thank you.
So just before that, Mr. Okuniyi, I'll come to you in just a moment, but I wanted Mr. Oguye to wrap his thought. We're talking about the statement made by Babangida, how that is not true. You felt that there were lapses in the statement.
He got what he wanted. He annulled the election. So he is giving an impression in his book that he took responsibility and all that. You know, when the election was annulled, he made a broadcast. President Ibrahim Babangida made a broadcast. And in that broadcast, he justified the annulment. He said that the election was not free and fair. In fact, he used the word that, yes, it was generally perceived to be free and fair, but that on a closer look, there were malpractice, and that therefore he annulled the election. Thereafter, he then set up an interim national government, and he said he was stepping aside. He was not done with Nigeria yet. And that was why in 2011, he still wanted to be president of Nigeria when he participated in the primaries of the PDP against Goodluck Jonathan. So this history that he's telling us now, people can write anything. But the people who live in this period, they were victims of this. And so, and when he was leaving, he also made the Abacha the Secretary of Defense. Abacha was Minister of Defense. He made him the Secretary of Defense of the interim national government. And so for 82 days. So what was going to happen? He got what he wanted. He annulled an election, and he didn't want the winner to govern. So for him now, many years after, to say, you know, I took responsibility because I was the president, but you know, now the election was free and fair. He won the election. But he said before, at that time, that he didn't win the election. That the election was not free and fair. And therefore, he orchestrated an indescribable situation of anomaly. You needed to live in that period of time. Many were killed. So he unfolded a situation in which a military successor, just a military successor, then became a tormentor that Nigeria had not witnessed before that time. People were sent to prison, and the gates to the prison were thrown away. You know what it was to get a kokori? Took him to prison in Katsina or Bama, the northernmost part of Nigeria, and kept him there for 4.5 up to 5 years. He was only released by Abdulsalami. So he created a situation in which his successor, in order to sustain his hold on power, was killing Nigerians, murdering people on the streets.
I was going to say that Mr. Okuniyi earlier was saying that this happened, because I asked him if this would have any healing impact on the country. He said it should. It should. But
you know all the money that he got through that process, and more people should donate. He should identify all those victims, and they are known throughout his regime, and give those money to them. Not that to bring their lives back as compensation. That's what I would recommend to him. And they are known, all those victims. You take your victims and you find them. You can't give such excuse and say you didn't know what we are doing. He created a situation. There was a transition. He kept shifting the goalpost. He kept extending it. He banned politicians. He banned them. He created 2 political parties. So at the tail end, he's now saying that, oh, you know, perhaps it was an irony of history. He organized perhaps the best election in Nigeria, and then his administration also annulled that election. You know, Other people can celebrate the fact that he's admitting that he won the election. But he didn't so admit at the time it was material, at the time it was important to save Nigerians from the unprecedented anomaly that Nigeria witnessed. You know, from a situation in which his successor had to preside over a government where people were being shot in the street. June 4, 1996, Kudrat Abiola. You know how many people died in that process? He created us, and he cannot absolve himself. And you know what? Throughout that period of time, when Abacha was in the saddle, on record, his mentor, President Ibrahim Babangida, was now hard to have publicly admonished him, don't do this to the Nigerian people. Everybody was afraid for his or her lives. And to make it worse, the person that was bounced out of power by them both then came to preside over a PDF to strengthen Abacha.
Mr. Akuni wants to respond because he's been listening. Mr. Akuni, how? I mean, I know you sort of took a slightly different opinion on this one, but just listening to Mr. Aguye, I mean, what do you make of all that he has said?
No, listening to Mr. Aguye, I mean, I could see very sound review of the history of the annulment. I could see that this is very in-depth analysis, and that's the truth about the situation. Babangida cannot excuse himself from the annulment. He did annul. I told you earlier that to me is unacceptable. But well, it is better late than never, though, this convention, because it has emboldened us to say what we did was right. It has revalidated our struggle for restoration of the mandate of MKO and democratic rule. Although it cost us a lot, there were huge sacrifices made, people paid the supreme price, etc. But that can still be compensated, like I said, by government and even IBB himself. IBB himself has made humongous resources out of government and so on, and it's living large. The kind of remorse to show now is for him to see, how do I share what I've taken out of government to victims, to victims of a situation created or foisted by me. And that is would have been termed a holy remorse. With God in heaven himself can begin to say, well, you have done atonement for what you have done. So it should, but government now, what we are talking about, government is a continuum. The present government should see to it that the Abiola family, just this DCFR, is heavily combat. Look at where they live. Armed robbers going there. Go to that house. It is something of its own. It's a different thing today. And you say this man won and he paid supreme sacrifice for democracy, and nothing is done to his family. Even his own personal will, is to his family. So whatever you want to do it to his family. And those who paid the supreme sacrifice, those who were detained, died in detention, people were shot, in prison. And we have a host of, we can help government do a list. We, sitting here, between myself and GT Oguyi, can do a list of those who paid supreme sacrifice, who made sacrifices, including the MKO Abiola. And government should attend to that as a compensation to acknowledge, or for the acknowledgement of the fact that MKO Abiola actually won, and those who struggled did it in the national interest. Not people like Abacha or IBB who did what they did in self-interest. It was for them to better their own lot and the rest. So I think that what we need to do now, moving forward, is also for government to begin to look at what MK Abiola stood for. I have analyzed and enumerated that earlier, that MK Abiola stood for a sovereign national country because he worked with the progressive at that time, the progressive who later formed NADECO, and they agreed that they were going to look at the constitution of Nigeria.
I will get to that conversation, Mr. Kuni, I'll get to that conversation in a moment, because that's where we're going to, how we're going to wind up. But I want to bring the conversation back to Mr. Oguye, because you've both talked about compensation, you know, vis-a-vis restitution. What will restitution and compensation look like?
Okay, let me give a context. First, before you talk about restitution or compensation, there must be unequivocal admission of wrong or guilt. And now we're talking about June 12 alone. But before June 12, certain things also happened in the life of that administration. There were alleged coup plots that were never executed. And I'm talking about the Versa coup. And people were killed. Military officers. You could say that they signed up and that they could die. But they didn't die at war. They were killed by their fellow military men who were, by conspiracy and coup plot, seized the reign of government. And that coup was not executed. So it was not like the Dinka coup of 1976. It was not like the Oka coup of April 1990. It was a rumored coup. And there was a controversy as to whether there was indeed a plot. And those officers were killed in that process. So I'm recommending that those people who lost their life without justification during that 8-year rule, there should be a collation. It's good that it's talking about presidential library. So in that history, there must be the naming and listing of people who died unjustly. There was Delegiwa, for God's sake. And of course, there is not an admission that his regime killed Delegiwa, but not before then and not after then did we have such a novel and unprecedented act of cruelty in Nigeria. It was sophisticated. Parcel bomb. Nobody had been killed by a parcel bomb since that time in 1986. And before that time, the elimination was so sophisticated in the middle of a war of attrition between that same person and his administration, to such an extent or a degree that he had to write a letter to Chief Gani Fawehinmi's lawyer. My life is in danger. They are threatening me. And boom, a parcel bomb was delivered to him. And then the administration said that he didn't know anything about it. So just as he took responsibility for an annulment, which he claimed he didn't do, he should be able to take certain responsibility and then collect this and then say, yes, I've had some money donated to me. I'm asking for more money. Government is a continuity. The federal government, yes, okay. I'm also a member of the Council of State. But I'm willing that during my administration, there are certain injustices that were perpetrated. And I wish that this should be done as an atonement, tokenistic atonement for what occurred. It won't bring life back. It won't bring Delegiwa back to life from his village. It won't bring back his mother. But that would serve as some kind of restitution. You know, we were talking about, reparation. Abiola was the one talking about reparation, during slavery and so on and so forth. And people didn't think that it was too distant in the past. I'm advocating that what occurred during that period and the period that followed the Abacha years, which he created by his own action. He was the head of state and commander-in-chief. He had the power to retire Abacha. He had the power to retire David Mark. He had the power to retire all those people that is now saying ganged up to frustrate him. He didn't do those. and it delivers us, in the manner of speaking, into Abacha hands. So this list can be done comprehensively.
Because I want to stay with you before we bring Mr. Okuni in.
Yes.
I had asked him this question earlier, and
Yes.
I want to ask it to you. Because we're a people who rarely and barely talk about history. We shy away from addressing issues of the past, and when we do, it is almost really distorted. You know how the hunter will tell the story in a way that glorifies him. And so I'm wondering if, because I was asking Mr. Okuni earlier, if this is now the time to address all the injustices of the past, whether it's the civil war, whether it's the assassinations,
where is the Ogoni issue?
Should we now take this moment? Does that set a springboard for all of these issues to be addressed?
I will recommend that. I will even recommend depersonalizing it. Let the federal government, for example, set up a commission, a body, to identify the historical injustices that have been done. Just like the Okuta panel, that was what they were supposed to do, but I'm not sure that it went that far. Okay? So let there be truth and reconciliation. Let there be compensation, restitution for these historical injustices. Look, if you see me, betraying some emotion and anger, it was because I lived in that time. I knew that the Nigerian people genuinely loved Babangida when he took over government. He was the darling of the media. They dubbed his administration an administration with the listening ear. He will conduct public debates, and we say that he conducted IMF debate whether we should receive IMF loan or not, and so on and so forth. And he set up perhaps a government where all the brilliant people were assembled. He was mentioning names. Professor Bolaji Akinyemi. How was it possible that Professor Oliko Iransom Kuti, Dr. Lagiju, all of them, he assembled so many people that I could remember the one of the Independence Day celebration in Lagos here. And rain was falling on October 1st and he was in the rain. And they were giving him an umbrella, and he refused to take that. He stood in the rain doing that. The media was celebrating him against the backdrop of what Buhari had done, imprisoning media men, via Decree 4, Tunde Thompson, Irabo, and so on and so forth. So they genuinely love him. And when he then started his transition program, and said that it was going to be credible and all that, people trusted him. So the anger people feel in their hearts is a measure of the disappointment. And he knew he disappointed a lot of people. Nobody asked you to come and be a military president. You staged a coup and became a military president. At least try to do what was right by the Nigerian people. And the way he handled that transition, and then an annulment, and then a successor government that was so brutish. All of us were underground. They talk about we passed through those things. People are being arrested left, right, and center, being put in military detention facility at DMI in Apapa, underground cell. It was horrible. So that kind of revisit is important, and I think that I will recommend that.
Mr. Okuni, rather. Mr. Ogui had talked about a Truth and Reconciliation Committee. You have talked about its Sovereign National Conference, as also recommended by some people after the death of MK Abiola. Mr. Ogui said something quite important. He talked about the anger, and you find that for some reason, young people are also angry. It looks like that anger sort of trickled down, even though the history that we sort of tell in our own generation, it seems very distorted. History looks like chains broken at different ends, not really woven together. And I'm wondering how you think that we can proceed. How do we begin? And if we were to make recommendation to this particular government, they're working on something for youth, but just nationally, what should be done?
Well, I think a certain point, like you have said, is a commission for national reconciliation and healing. You can call it Truth Commission. You can give it whatever label or name, but it should be focused on delivering national reconciliation and healing. And that can then take us to the Sovereign National Conference. They are not mutually exclusive. They are in fact, intertwine. One can lead to the other. And at that level, you can find, you know, how to deal with the youth, how to sort out the anger of the youth within the National Reconciliation and Healing Commission. You can, for process, you can find the government recently said they were going to have a youth conference, and they abandoned it. I don't know why. I don't know whether that is taking the youth for granted, but I think they still need that conference, and which can be situated within the context of a National Reconciliation and Healing Conference. We can take it together so that you don't have a separate youth conference, but you look at the nation holistically and then move into having a true people's constitution. Except you have a constitution that is of the people, that is owned by the people, made by the people for themselves, and democratically, you know, adopted, you may not have a Nigeria that is stable, and you may still have an emperor emerge, because what you have today gives humongous power to governors and the president, and you know, power itself intoxicates. Power, they say, power corrupt, absolute power corrupt, absolutely. And that's why we have a lot of impunity around the country, because of the kind of power that the military gain. Because they assume that we're going to have a continuation of the military rule. They didn't look at it well. It was not well designed in 1998. What was designed was in the gap of the military, not democratic enough, not for democratic federation or federalism. So we need to change that, so that governance itself can be, you know, something that will bring about dividends of democracy, which we are not finding for the people. It's only those who are in government, in the parliament, wherever, in the executive, that have the largest, that have the perks of office, they have, you know, everything to themselves. Is not going down, because
I want to give the final few minutes I have. I think it's about 2 minutes I have left, Mr. Kuni. I want to give it to Mr. GT Ogunye here in the studio as we wrap. The elephant in the room for a lot of people is whether MK Abiola should be, you know, designated a president. That has not been done. He got a title of GCFR from the Buhari administration rather. But people felt that look, well, it's not. It's like dancing around the issue without hitting the nail on the head. What's your recommendation in that regard? I
recommend that by some protocols or by some creative lawmaking, maybe by resolution passed by the National Assembly, I don't know, the validity of an executive order, there should be such formal designation as a former president. And not only that, for the period he was in prison, between that 1993, June 12, 1993 election and 1999, you know, he should be paid salaries posthumously, some kind of compensation for that period. Because he should have been sworn in as the president, and his tenure wouldn't have ended first tenure until 4 years thereafter. But that was frustrated by the intervention, first by the treasury of military president, unfortunately, and by the intervention of Abacha. I think that will be part of the package that should, you know, assuage the people of this country, not just Abiola's family, but the people of this country.
I mean, it's a very interesting conversation, one that we can go on, you know, and on forever. It just has a lot of legs, but we do have to leave it here. Thank you so much for your time, lawyer and rights activist GT Ogunye, joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for your time as well. Olawale Okuni, who is a convener, June 12 Movement of Nigeria, and the General Secretary of the Patriots. Thank you both for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's standpoint.